because you will be the first after some 3 minutes of introduction from myself.
Okay.
So, okay, so we are live now. I am happy to welcome you here to our session Adoption, Adaptation and Extension. And we all the presenters are ready also for their talks. And I am now currently not aware how many participants we have. I don't know whether somebody sees this from you. But anyhow, a big welcome over the internet to all of you. Myself, my name is Brigitte Kaufmann. I'm here the scientific director of the German Institute for Tropical and Subtropical Agriculture. And I'm actually specialized in transdisciplinary research, mostly with low external input systems in tropical countries. Okay, so far. And to not delay, I am one thing I wanted to say is the interaction with the wider community will happen over the chat and your questions that you will send to us to the presenters. And please feel free starting questions while you are listening to the presentation so that then at the end they are ready and there is time enough so that they can be answered. Thank you very much. Now I welcome the first presenter. It's Enoch from Ghana. And Enoch, you can get ready to share your screen. And
Okay.
while you do this, I will read the title of your presentation. It is Determinants of Adaptation Strategies to Climate Change, Implications on Sustainable Agriculture in Ghana. Thank you very much. Yes, go on.
Thank you.
Slide there.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone online. My name is Enoch Besa and I'm presenting on the steady determinant of adaptation strategies to climate change, its implication for sustainable agriculture in Ghana. And this study was done in collaboration with a colleague in Germany at University of Berlin. My outline will follow. I'll present from introduction through objectives, the materials used for the study, and discuss some results and conclude, all within the stipulated time. As a form of introduction, food insecurity is more pronounced in Sub-Saharan Africa. And due to climate change, this situation will worsen. It's already worsening and it will continue to worsen in future if nothing is done about it. And in Sub-Saharan Africa, most of our farmers are smallholder farmers, especially in Ghana. And these farmers depend solely on rainfall for their production. And this, because of their dependence on rainfall, their vulnerability is very high. And this calls for a study that will help strengthen their adaptive capacity and improve their resilience to climate change. The study was to identify the adaptation strategies used by maize farmers and analyze factors that influences their decision to adapt more strategies in combating climate change. And the study focused on maize farmers because maize and cassava are the two food security crops in Ghana. Maize is the first, followed by cassava. The study was carried in the Pra River Basin, located in the southwestern part of Ghana. It cut across 4 regions, and during the sampling of the 10 districts where the study took place, 3 of the regions were selected. The 3 regions were Eastern, Ashanti, and Central. And these 3 regions are part of the 5 regions producing over 80% of maize in Ghana. And out of the 10 districts that were selected for the study, 4 of them have an average annual production higher than the national average. That is Atiwa District, East Akim, Amansia West, and Chifuheman Lower. Their production annually per hectare is higher than the national average. And this makes it relevant to know how climate change is impacting their activities. and what influences their decision. A multi-stage sampling technique was used to select 344 respondents for the study. Initially, a special random sampling was done to select the 10 districts and purposively 3 communities lying close to rivers. That is to assess the availability of water to produce maize during the lean season or the dry season. And semi-structured survey questionnaire was used to collect the data. Both descriptive and inferential analysis were carried out. For the inferential, the Tobin regression model was used because this data was censored, and also multiple variables or options, adaptation options, were being assessed. These are the variables used for the study. And the result showed that most of the respondents were males, and the average age of the respondents was 49, and their highest education level was secondary. And in these terms, the secondary education represents about 12 years schooling. And most of the farmers were experienced. They have over 20 years of experience in maize production, and household size was about 7. And majority were natives of the locations where they were farming. Looking at the institutional variables, that is the constraints of agricultural extension, credit constraints, and land tenure, most of them were constrained with land issues, that they were not owners of the land. They were hiring it from other natives to produce their maize. And in infrastructure, majority had access to electricity. About 88% of them had access to electricity, and 64 had access to training, mostly through the extension services. And on the perception variables, almost all the farmers, about 98%, they are aware of climate change. However, their access to weather information was very low, and their perception on rainfall, especially rainfall amount, was in the decreasing trend. Farmers adopt these strategies to combat climate change. They plant trees, they change their planting dates, they are using improved maize varieties, they use agrochemicals as the fertilizer and pesticides in their farming. A few of them have access to planting along rivers as an adaptation measure. They also adopt mixed cropping, cover cropping, and mulching, as well as crop rotation. Averagely, farmers are adapting 5 strategies in their maize production. The minimum strategies are 2 and maximum 7. They do them in combination, not separately, in their production. And after the analysis, the results show that education, household size, marital status, and widowhood status significantly influence the decision of farmers to increase their adaptation strategies. And labor constraints negatively influenced it, which means that as labor became inaccessible, farmers they are more likely to reduce the strategies adopted in their maize production in combating climate change. All the institutional variables negatively influenced farmers' ability to adopt more strategies. That is, limited access to agricultural extension services, limited access to credit, and land tenure reduced their adaptation strategies. And on considering their access to infrastructure, electricity influenced farmers or made them more likely to adopt more strategies. And this is so because most of the farmers rely on media for their climate information. They rely on media. So access to electricity implies that the availability of power to use either radio or television to have access to information on their activities. Training workshops and finance was not significant, did not significantly influence the decision of farmers. On the perception, Farmers who perceive that rainfall is decreasing increases their adaptation strategies, and as well as those who have access to weather information and awareness of climate change. This significantly influenced their decision to increase adaptation strategies for in their maize production. In conclusion, using different adaptation strategies together help improve the resilience of farmers to climate change, and in essence will increase the sustainability or sustainably increase food production, education levels, household sizes, marital status, that is being married or you are a widow, and having access to electricity had positive influence on the number of adaptation strategies that farmers were using. The And labor constraint, mostly the institutional variables, labor constraints, limited access to extension services, not having access to funds, especially now that due to the uncertain climate, farmers need insurance. They need to insure their crop to be able to access funds. When these things are not there, the farmers tend to reduce their adaptation strategies. And for policy, for us to achieve sustainable agri-food systems and increase our production, specifically on maize, these variables must be considered in the national climate change policy, and then it should be prioritized to help farmers cope with the changes that are taking place, thereby increasing their production and sustaining their livelihood. These recommendations are made for policy, are proposed for policy. Farmers awareness should continue because the study realized that those who are aware of climate change tend to increase their adaptation strategies to improve their production. Credit should be made available. Provision of credit should be made available and affordable to farmers to be able to increase their strategies, because most of them are tending to go into more of agrochemicals, and the cost of agrochemicals makes most reduce their adaptation strategies when there's a lack of funds. And rural electrification, according to the study, will help empower farmers to adopt more strategies in their production. So rural electrification should be enhanced and farmer education should be promoted, especially in these areas, because most of the farmers are living in rural communities. This research was funded by the International Foundation of Science in Sweden and was supported by the International Support Network for African Development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Enoch. Yeah, it's good that you stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
And I see that we have here some questions already in our from outside. And the first question is actually to you. I think it is more a question of interest. In Ghana, are there breeding efforts to develop varieties adapted to changing climate conditions? So it's not really your field, but I guess you might also be able to answer this. So are there,
Come again, please.
yeah,
The question,
yeah,
I missed some part.
oh, sorry. The question was whether there are made breeding efforts to develop varieties in maize that are adapted to changing climate conditions. So more
Yeah,
efforts on breeding.
yes, please. Thank you for the question. In Ghana, we have an institute known as the CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Crop Research Institute in Kumasi specifically. They are the ones breeding varieties of maize. Currently, most of the farmers are using Obatampa, which is a product from the institute. And due to the limited maturing period of the maize, that particular variety, most of the farmers are adopting it. And currently they are trying different breeds. And because I'm also affiliated partly to them, I know that they are working on other climate resilient maize varieties, which will be coming out very soon. So we have those facilities available and farmers are benefiting from it.
Okay, thank you. And then there is another small question here. It says, is use of pesticides a climate smart adaptation strategy? So I was not aware that you mentioned it, but maybe I have also not grasped it. Did you mention this, that use of pesticide is a climate smart adaptation?
Yes, the use of pesticides because of climate change. Now there is a problem of armyworm. If you know about armyworm, that destroy most majorly maize in Ghana and not Ghana in West Africa. This is a problem that cuts across West Africa. In our visit to some of the farms last year and this year, if your maize is at the early stages and there are no rains on the farm to reduce the atmospheric temperature, armyworm destroy most of the farms. You might not have anything to harvest. So farmers tend to use pesticides to control these armyworms as a form of adaptation strategies to climate change, because this armyworm is of recent and it's because of the increasing temperature. That is why they are using that to control. I hope I was able to answer
Yes,
the
you
question.
answered it very clearly. Thank you very much. Very informative. And are there questions here from our group, from the group of presenters? If not, I have still a small question. I think we can just spend 2 more minutes, because I found also your analysis very interesting. And I understood that you checked which factors influence the increase in adaptation strategies. And I'm wondering whether the different adaptation strategies they use, they have different requirements. So probably it would also be interested to assess which factors influence the uptake of particular strategies. Were you also able to do this? Are you planning to do this, or don't you think it's interesting?
Yes, please. We are planning to do that. Currently, myself and my colleague, we are working on that aspect of the work, which we hope that after this conference, we'll put both sides together for publication. So we are planning to look at those specific areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Enoch, for your interesting presentation. And then I will welcome now our next presenter. This is Ben. Ben, are you getting ready? Ben is currently in Uganda, although he is reporting on work from Tanzania. And the topic of his presentation will be bridging the information gap for increased livestock productivity. Evidence from the use of SMS messaging among smallholder farmers in the Babati district in Tanzania. Yes, Ben, thank you for sharing the screen, and the floor is yours. No, we don't hear you. No, we don't hear you. We heard you before, but we are not hearing you now.
I'm speaking now. I don't know whether you can hear me now.
It's a very slow voice, so you might put off the video and then possibly the audio will get better.
Okay, so hello everyone. I want to quickly go through a very short piece of presentation about disseminating information through SMS and the impact of those messages to smallholder farmers in Tanzania. As you know, the smallholder farmers have problems in raising their animals throughout the year because of feed shortages. But we also have some improved interventions that have been tested and they have shown good results. However, farmers don't have access to these good interventions. And usually it's because of inadequate extension services in the entire sub-Saharan Africa, because of limited access to knowledge and resourcing problems that go with that. Sorry, yeah. So the extension services in Tanzania, like anyone else, are not inadequate, as I was explaining below, because of the slow uptake of related interventions, reduced productivity, which results in slow uptake, reduced activity, inability of farmers to cope with the demand of various livestock products. And so we decided to incorporate some ICT solutions in the extension services using a Mwanga platform, a platform put together that is designed to push information services, information messages to farmers through their mobile phones via an SMS service. So the objective was to just pushing this, was to evaluate how short messaging services can reduce the knowledge gaps in smallholder farmers, among smallholder farmers, and increase uptake of this. So it was just a straightforward objective. So what we used mixed methods of qualitative and quantitative approaches. And we did this in northern Tanzania in a small district called Babati. And what we did, we took baseline information of knowledge, attitudes, and practices of farmers, pushed out information through this platform, and assessed the knowledge of the farmers at the end of the 14 weeks that we were pushing out messages through an SMS service. This involved 100 farmers, and in 13 villages where we had worked for 2 years, introducing new technologies amongst those farmers. So we had control and action sites within those 13 villages. So we conducted focus group discussions to talk to the farmers, to assess their knowledge, attitudes, and practices, and also to get insights from farmers on their experiences with the messages that we disseminated to them through the Mwanga platform. And quickly, the results came out. They were very interesting, actually. First of all, the farmers were aware, very much aware about the technologies that we had disseminated to them. We had pushed out there about 8 Napier grass varieties. As you see from the results, the farmers were able to identify all those varieties by name, of course, at different proportions. So, and we had between 60 and in some cases 100% of the trained farmers adopting or taking up the improved technologies that we had disseminated to them. However, in some of the districts, the adoption was pretty much low, maybe for up to 45%, particularly for BashNet, and we will discuss some of the reasons why those were low. So in the diffusion of these technologies, we noted that the farmers who are trained on different topics shared the information that they received through the SMS services. And this is significant. Significant in the sense that if farmers receive information through SMS services, there is a potential that they could share that information with their peer farmers who are doing the same thing. Farmers also were able to share some of the planting materials that we introduced in the villages and the agronomic practices that we introduced within villages. And in some cases, these span over a long distance within the villages. So some results, quick look at the changes in knowledge, attitude, and practices. We can note that the forage yields, the fact that the farmers acknowledge the changes in the forage yields, there was some change there in terms of awareness, knowledge, and attitude and practices. And also the farmers increase their knowledge on the essential nutrients that the calves need on smallholder farmers and how much water to give to their animals. Otherwise, we see that in some other attributes, particularly those pertaining to forages, we had very little change in the knowledge and attitudes of those farmers. I'm having challenges a bit in moving my slides on this side.
So it doesn't, you might go back to the normal PowerPoint mode and then restart it if it is stopped.
Looks, yeah, I'm just trying to see whether I can, yeah, it's moved. And the sharing of knowledge amongst farmers, that slide just shows us the extent to which farmers shared information. The blue shows us the farmers who didn't share information, and the green bars shows the proportion of farmers who shared information. But all in all, we are having a larger proportion of farmers, in some cases more than 50%, up to 100% sharing information with other farmers. The changes in attitude and behavior. And attitude and behavior is the perception the farmers have on those interventions, but also whether they take them up, whether they practice those interventions. So keeping of exotic breeds, farmers choosing forages based on how their yields are good, farmers formulating their feeds better, and farmers understanding the need for the cost. And all this was significant amongst the sample of farmers that we looked at. So in conclusion, that we found that the Mwanga platform has potential to increase dissemination and adoption of improved forages and feed technologies, and that the platform can contribute to a change in attitude, knowledge, and behavior towards livestock and feed interventions. And peer learning amongst farmers is critical in the uptake of the new interventions. I apologize for the hitches in the slide movement, but I hope I passed a lot of the information that I had.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It was also really clearly understandable. Thanks a lot, despite the small audio problems. So thank you for your presentation. I have indeed already one question here for you from our wider audience. So, and the question reads, it's actually a question here. Go, then I can tell you who asked this question. It's asked by Esther Muyuka, and she asked, for new technologies, low awareness has been demonstrated. What do you think? Increased awareness for the technologies you were disseminating. What do you think increased the awareness for the technologies?
Sorry, you are getting truncated. Just say that again.
So she says that, in fact, one reason why technologies are not adopted is because there is a low awareness. And now, in your case, what did you do to increase the awareness about the new technology?
Okay, in the 1 year that in about 2 years that we worked in this place, we used the group approach within farmers, and within farmers we trained volunteer farmer trainers within those groups on these new technologies, and allowed the volunteer farmers to intermingle and train peer farmers. That's one of the approaches that we used. The other approaches we used was to have regular training sessions that we organized through the extension service. And we did that because we were supporting them, first of all, with both information and material, but we wanted to allow sustainability of the training programs to go on without reliance on the project.
Yeah, and then and this was now paralleled by the was now paralleled by the SMS, or how is the connection between the two? Ben, did you hear me?
Sorry.
Okay, it seems there is a internet problem.
The connection is.
Yeah, also stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Can you, shall I repeat what I said?
Yes, please.
Okay, Ben, nice that you are back. So
Please do.
Yes. So you were really nicely explaining how you were sharing information about the innovations and also the peer-to-peer exchange. I also appreciate this method a lot. And now, in addition, you did this SMS service. So what was the connection between the two? Were these new farmers that were confronted with the information through the SMS, or were those the farmers that also learned from peer-to-peer or extension?
Yes, it was a mixture of farmers. We had a database of the farmers that participated in the project, but we also had a database of farmers who peer farmers and volunteer farmers reached out to. So it was a pool of farmers that had a mixture of those who were in the project, but also those who received secondary information either through extension or peer farmers.
Okay, thank you. I see, Enoch, you have a question for Ben. You can say it yourself. He wrote it in the chat. I can also read it to you, but I thought it's nicer when he says it. So the question from Enoch is, what are the possible factors influencing the decision of the farmers to share or to not share the information? Did you ever look in this topic?
Yes, we spoke to farmers. We asked farmers about that. First of all, the reason for not sharing, the farmers just simply told us we did not know we were supposed to share. So which means that if the farmers are not prompted to share information, they might not share information. Mm-hmm. But the other factor that prompted farmers to share is because they meet in groups, in villages. They belong to other social gatherings and groups. So when they meet in these social gathering groups, during their discussions, they begin to discuss about what message did they receive. And in the process, the farmers who did not receive the information benefit from the discussion that those farmers who have received information are sharing. So there are social interactions that encourage the sharing of information.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Social networks, if you like.
Yes. Thank you very much. We could really go on with talking about your study. It's very interesting, but time is up. So I'm now, we are now
I'm
going.
not sure whether the education, sorry.
Yeah, was a factor. Yes, it's okay. I asked the question slightly more open.
Go ahead.
Yes. So thank you very much, Ben. And you can still exchange with Enoch afterwards in the session. And I'm now welcoming Sien from Vietnam to give us the next presentation. And yes, and Sien, you can start sharing your screen while
yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, I read your title for your presentation, and this is Knowledge, Decision-Making Capacity, and Risk Attitude among Farmers in Vietnam. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for letting me having a chance to be here with you, and thank you to be in my presentation. And in 10 minutes, I'm going to present actually one of my PhD papers. I graduated from Hannover University under supervision of Professor Weber, and thanks to TVSET project for letting us using the data and to conduct this research. And in 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to my research by telling you the research problem, objectives, data, methodology used, and results and conclusions. And why the research problems was found interesting to us. First of all, we would see from previous studies that they found, the farmers are in a poor condition, they're in a poor country, but they seem to be quite creative and successful in doing business. And why? Basically, they are quite depends on their experience, and the more experienced they are, the more successful in their business. But it happens only in the case that the business as usual, or there's no shocks or change in the big change in the environment. But if the environment change and also shocks happen, then probably the farmers face with a lot of difficulties. And in that case, maybe the subjective experience would not help them. And it's observed from previous studies that in Vietnam, for example, in some regions, the farmers are not benefiting equally compared to other regions when the country is growing up. And why that happens, and it's also evidenced by other studies that the farmers somehow, because they heavily depends on their experience and subject knowledge, also the way they adopt technology and adapt to the climate change, for example, it's not successful, it's not so efficient in some situation. And that's the reason why the farmers also face with problem of, they may pay higher costs for the information because of the access availability and also other constraints. And they face with higher risks, and the strategies towards risk would be challenging for them. And look at the relation amongst what we mentioned here about the knowledge, about the risk behaviors, and the performance in agriculture. We going to investigate the relation amongst those factors, and the some sample that we took coming from Thừa Thiên Huế province in Vietnam, in central Vietnam. And for details, we evaluate the relationship, we evaluate the risk attitude of the farmers, the knowledge they have for agricultural production, their decision-making ability, their cognitive skills, their confidence in making decisions and in knowledge they have, and also the real performance that they have in crop production and livestock production. And we would like to see whether if they have a better knowledge, better skills, then they are more likely to take risks and deal with risk in doing business. And if they have a higher knowledge, then they are more efficient in doing business. Or if they are more risk-taking, then they perform better. And those questions would be answered by, first of all, the data that we used. I would give a brief description of the data. So as I mentioned before about the TVSET project, this is a big project for interdisciplinary topics. And for this research, we used the data from only one province among 3 provinces chosen in Vietnam, and that is Hue province. And the panel data that we use for calculating the agricultural productivity from the data, 7 ways data from 2007 to 2015. And in 2 years, 2014 and 2015, we conducted at the same time a survey and an experiment. The experiments we used to measure the risk behaviors and also to use the test to evaluate, to measure the knowledge of the farmers and also the decision-making capacity or skills of the farmers at the same time. So to answer the questions, we use basically the descriptive analysis. We use several tests to assess the farmers' knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and also to investigate the relation amongst the agricultural production or agricultural productivity, the farmers' decision capacity, the knowledge, and the risk attitudes. So now I show you a bit about the results. Just I just use one. I've shown you here just one of the measure that we use to measure the risk, to calculate the risk taking behavior of the farmer. That is the experiment that using the lottery choice among 20 rows that we ask the farmers to choose between 2 options. And from that, we calculate the risk-taking score for each farmer. And let's see here in the graph, we see from the row 11, at the row 11, that the farmers show to be risk neutral. And to the left, the farmers show to be risk averse. And to the right, the farmer are risk-taking. So for more details of the experiments, maybe I would explain to you in other contexts because we have a limited time here. Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, the graph shows us that the majority of farmers are risk-averse. Yeah. And for the score, the test score for farmer knowledge in crop and livestock production, we also noted that the majority of the farmer have a quite low score in the test, showing that they have a limited knowledge in crop production and livestock production. Basically, and compare between the crops and livestock, we see that the farmer more likely have a higher score for livestock production than crop production, probably because livestock production is more commercial in the area, and also, the farmer face more and need to understand more about the market, and also they need to, they also get more information about the livestock production rather than the crop production. And crop production goes to the more to the subjective knowledge rather than the technical knowledge. the farmer. And in a test for the decision making, we give the farmers two options to let them choose between the two to the option we call it correct when the option that farmer chose is to maximize their profit. And you see here that half, even more than half of the farmers chose the wrong answer. It means that they chose the option that is not to maximize profit. Yeah. And here we can say that the farmers might be not rational in a way that they didn't choose the one that's to maximize their profit. Then they choose by other, they may based on their own experience, and they choose by just one of the criteria. Is not the overall picture of the context. And we look at the extension services, and we wonder if the extension service available, and also whether farmers receive the extension, the support from the workers, from the local government, support from the local government or not. And we noticed that the to the right, sorry for this very small text here, maybe you couldn't see, to the right of the graph, showing that the less frequency, less frequent that the farmers receive the extension service. And it's the same pattern for here, the livestock extension services. So sorry, the first graph is showing for the crop extension, yes, and the next one for livestock extension service. And the two graphs or four graphs show the same pattern, that the farmers reported that they received quite limited extension service. Yeah, and the same for training, participating in training. Still not less than half of the farmers reported that they received training to support them in agriculture production. So in general, we can conclude from here that the farmer received very limited support in terms of the training, also in terms of the visiting frequency of the extension service workers. And in a test,
your time is up. You need to come to a conclusion.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to the conclusion now. Sorry. So the farmers, we find in our research that have quite low knowledge, both in technical and subjective terms. And the farmers also perform, is like their performance quite depends on the subjective knowledge rather than technical knowledge. They have a limited support from the extended service, also from training that's offered by the local government. And the farmers are risk averse in general, and they in the test we found that the technical knowledge more likely to connect with the livestock, so they have a better knowledge, better livestock production, but it's not for crop. And the risk attitude of the farmer is significantly linked to the technical knowledge and the decision-making ability, but not to the agricultural performance. So that is still quite a lot of thing to go further in the next studies that we want to do to minimize the limitation of this study and to go further to better policy implications. So thank you very much. I'm sorry for running off the time. So thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments.
Yeah, thank you, Sian, very much. You might stop sharing the presentation and you can bring your camera if you like. There is then with my intervention time for one question. There is currently not yet a question here from the wider community. I am interested, you might explain, you said that you differentiated subjective knowledge and technical knowledge. Tell us a bit more about what falls under subjective farming knowledge.
Yeah, the subjective, thank you for the question. The subject knowledge that basically we ask the farmer if they know about what they think that is true, that is correct, the way they do agricultural activity, and the technical knowledge that we test them by the question with the correct and wrong answer. So technical knowledge, basically we use the knowledge that is available in textbook, in the yeah, rather than by asking them to trust themselves. Yes.
Okay. Because
Yes.
of course a lot of their knowledge is contextual also, and then might come in different forms from the just form textbook knowledge.
Yes.
It's interesting topic. We could also go on with it, but unfortunately time is
thank you very much.
thank you
Yes,
very much for the
yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so then we come to our next presentation, and the next presentation is by Caetano. Welcome, and you can get ready to share your screen.
I think the IT will play the video. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Caetano.
We don't see it yet. Please, yeah, it's coming. Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Caetano Luis Beber, and I'm going to present you our work entitled Contract Farming Effects on Technical Efficiency of the Export-Oriented Rice Production Sector in Vietnam. It was developed together with Hoang Lenok, Ludwig Toivsen, and Verena Otter. So contract farming has received attention as a way to better link smallholder farmers to food value chains and to overcome some market barriers. It also ensures the raw material supplies by the contractors to these farmers, and which can result in reduced production uncertainty, shifting the risk from producers and the farmers to the processors through their supply of most of the inputs, and can also help in increasing technical efficiency and productivity on these farms. So this vertical integration via contracts also supports the parties, the farmers and the processors in having more scale of production, so more quantity of products and also high quality of the products supplied. However, some problems might hinder the adoption and enforcement of contracts, especially the small scale of some farming areas and also farms, the small and medium-sized enterprise, the processing enterprise who making the contracts with the farmers, and the complex judicial systems in some countries. The poor coordination among parties and unfavorable terms and conditions of contracts, especially for the farmers, but also some social demographic characteristics can be some constraints for the implementation of such contracts, like the high age of the household head or the low educational level and the lack of farming experience of these farmers. So the literature on contract farming show that most of the studies assess the impact of contract farming on household incomes, and there are very few studies that assess its impact on technical efficiency and productivity, which are important measures for the sustainability of farms. And these studies, they also failed to implement a control for sample selection bias in the contract farming adoption leading choice. To our knowledge, this was only the study of Henningsen in 2015 adopted this control. So our objective here is to study the potential productivity increase in rice production by contract farming participation, implementing a control for sample selection bias. So here just a short background on the rice sector in Vietnam. It's a very important staple food and commodity in Vietnam, mostly produced in the Red River Delta and the Mekong River Deltas. Rice is one of the largest export commodities in Vietnam and making Vietnam the second largest rice exported worldwide. Contract farming is a new scheme in the rice sector, but it's gaining attention in the last days, and nearly 70% of the export rice farmers in Vietnam have farm size of less than 0.5 hectares, showing a very small scale of the rice farming production in Vietnam. So here we have an overview of the supply chain of the export rice sector in the Mekong River Delta of Vietnam, and we see that the transactions via contract farming between farmers and private enterprise correspond to only 4.2% of these transactions. So our methodology involved in the first step the estimation of the production frontiers for the pooled sample, but also for the sample divided in the control farmers and the contract farming farmers. After that, we did a first control for sample selection bias on observable variables, where we estimated the product model with observable characteristics, and we created a matched sample with comparable control farmers, which are now we can compare. They have the same propensity score than the contract farming farmers. And after that, we estimated the stochastic frontier analysis. We estimate the production functions again with control for sample selection bias using the model of green on unobservable characteristics that could still have some influence on the self-selection of farmers. And then we using these two controls, we have a full control for observable and observable characteristics in the sample selection bias. After that, we did a meta-frontier analysis to estimate, to control for the technological difference among groups, among the groups contract farming and control farmers. And for this, we use an approach of Huang, 2014, where he developed a stochastic meta-frontier approach. And then we can have an estimation of the effects of contract farming on the technology gap ratio, so the technology adoption of the farmers, the group technical efficiency, and the meta-technology technical efficiency, which is a combination of the both group technical efficiency and technology gap ratio. Our sample was collected in the Mekong River Delta in 3 provinces, 12 villages. It is a cross-section data of 2015 and 2016. The number of observations is 246, where 115 are non-contract participants and 131 are contract participants. So here we see the results of the parameter estimates for the probability selection equation and the propensity score matching. So the balancing property of the propensity score matching is satisfied, despite only few observed differences in the means. The empirical results show that total family members working in agriculture reduce the probability of farmers adopting a contractual scheme, while the availability of extension services increase this probability. So this suggests that farmers receiving extension visits are more likely to participate in contractual schemes. So here we have the results of the parameter estimates for the conventional and the sample selection stochastic prediction frontier models with the unmatched and the matched sample. So as expected and recurrent in agricultural production frontiers, for all models, the input land contributes the most to farm production. The input land is followed by seeds in magnitude, labor and fertilizer also have an important contribution to the production in most of the models. The pooled model in the first column gives us a first indication that there is indeed a difference between contract farming and control farmers based on the significant difference of the parameter contrast. This result is corroborated by the log likelihood ratio test, which offers evidence favoring the estimation of separate technologies for contract farming in the one side and the control for the other side instead of the pooled sample. So the estimation of the sample selection models reveals that the coefficients for the selectivity variable ρ is statistically non-different from 0 for both groups, control farmers and contract farming in the matched and unmatched samples. Therefore, the unobserved factors, they do not account for difference in the technical efficiency of contract farming farmers against control farmers. So our results show no selection bias in unobservable variables for contract farming, and these remain consistent across unmatched and matched samples. So we can conclude that the self-selection bias in our sample is satisfactorily controlled. So here we have the estimates of our meta frontiers, and in black we have the contract farming groups, and in gray we have the control farmers groups. So the results of our group technical efficiencies show similar results across all the models, even lower for the contract farming group. However, they are only relevant for comparison within groups, not across groups. To compare the different groups is necessary to define a common benchmark. That's why we estimated the meta frontier. Okay, so the meta frontiers, they allow us to assess the technology gap ratios as a measure of distance of the group frontier, each group, contract farming and control farmers, to the meta frontier, which involves both groups, indicating the technology gap of each individual group. So on average, the results of this technology gap ratio for contract farming farmers are significantly higher than those of the control farmers, ranging from 94% in the conventional models to 97% in the sample selection model using matched sample. So the average result of technology gap ratio for control farmers range from 71 in the sample selection model with a matched sample to 80% in the conventional model using the matched sample. So the results show that contract farming farmers, they have access to better technology, likely receiving better production input from contractors. These results also suggest that while the contracts raised the technology gap in favor of contract farmers, it had a negative effect on the technical efficiency in the short run. This negative effect, however, on the technical efficiency is consistent with the notion that these farmers, the contract farming farmers, they experienced a significant improvement in production technologies, but it is very likely that they were still in the learning by doing stages at the time that the data was collected, so a bit less efficient at that point. So to conclude, we see that land has the highest contribution to the production of the outputs, although seeds, fertilizer, and labor also contributes with important shares, and contract farming schemes improve farmers' technology gap ratio from 14 to 15 percentage points, meaning that their production frontier is situated much higher than that of the control farmers in relation to a common benchmark. So to guarantee a broader use of contract farming, the governments they should promote the institutional development, providing a secure and reliable environment for the establishment and enforcement of contracts between producers and processors. So guaranteeing more juridical safeness, transparency, corruption control, and bureaucracy reduction in these countries. Um, our results also support the land policy implemented by the Vietnam, which promotes the parcel consolidation. However, this should be carefully implemented to avoid rural exodus, and educational and technical assistance programs should be established for a more efficient use of new technologies. These are the institutions who finance and support this research, which we are thankful. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Kaitan, thank you very much for your really interesting presentation. It's more also for specialists on your methodology, which unfortunately I am not, but I think there are some people who are really appreciating this.
Yeah, it's a bit technical in some points, in more efficiency analysis, productivity analysis, sure.
Yeah. And you might, maybe I start with a question, because the idea is also really to determine it's about productivity, and the determination of productivity is usually much more complicated than production, of course, and particularly if then there is a raise in input and more technology use, the input side increases. So I was wondering, how did you determine productivity actually?
Actually, the productivity was measured by the technology gap ratio in this case, and also by the technical efficiency together. And we see that the efficiency levels of both groups, control farmers and contract farmers, they are almost not different, a bit less, even for the contract farming, so showing that they are a bit less efficient in the transformation of inputs into outputs. However, they received via these contracts, they get better access to the inputs. And therefore, they have a bit better technology. That's why their productivity increased. The total production at the end was higher because of this better inputs. But yeah, the really transformation of one quantity of input into output, they are a bit less efficient, let's say.
Okay.
Because having better technology, they get more productivity. Yeah.
So essentially, they get more production.
Yeah.
But the technical efficiency could still be increased, because I think this is often a problem indeed. Yeah. And many people talk about productivity, but finally calculate production. And so it's really interesting to look specifically at this technical efficiency, what you did. Yeah.
Exactly. It's good to separate both, because then you can exactly know if they're being more efficient or just they're receiving better technology. And then you can have these two things to compare and know where is the problem exactly. If they need to get better inputs, or they have to receive more training to make the transformation of inputs into outputs in a better way.
Yeah, or through this contract arrangement also get access to cheaper inputs in effect. So
or to cheaper inputs. But then we didn't do this, but this would be a next step of the of this research, doing a cost analysis, taking all the price of inputs and also the price of outputs, and then you can really have a full overview of what is getting more profitable for the farmers, what is better for the farmers.
Yeah. Yes, but really an interesting topic, and particularly contract farming can contribute to solving these market access problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
Particularly for small-scale farmers that are usually excluded from those chains. So
Yes.
it's a nice topic to study.
Yeah, and it's also a, let's say, relatively cheap solution that can be arranged between the farmer and the processing company with some incentives from the government, of course, but it's not an expensive solution for resolving the problems of productivity.
Yeah, and indeed, by increasing relations, so something that is actually on the information side,
Exactly.
and managing economic benefits. It's also
exactly the share of information from the processing companies to the farmers and backwards. So yeah, of course, this is creating more this network in the rural areas. It's always important because sometimes farmers, they are isolated and then don't have access to good quality information, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for this interesting presentation. Yes.
Thank you very much.
And so then we are now coming to, already time passes really quickly, to our last presentation. This is by Lucira. And she's from Uganda. And Lucira, you hear me, and your presentation is also going to be uploaded.
Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes, they should play the presentation. Thank you, session chair. Thank you, session chair. Thank you, our distinguished participants joining in this session. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to this presentation when I share with you results of a study on backyard gardening innovations towards enhanced vegetable consumption for nutritional security among the urban and peri-urban dwellers in central Uganda. My name is Lucira Nasiru Mbisanya. I work as a lecturer at Makerere University, and formerly I worked as a senior research officer at the National Agricultural Research Organization in Naro in Uganda. So the work that I present to you is the work that I did with my colleagues at Naro. And as we all know, food and nutritional security remains a challenge, especially among the urban poor, due to rapid urbanization and also increasing levels of unemployment and underemployment. And this makes the urban poor to be at a risk of experiencing malnutrition. Studies show that consistent and regular consumption of African leafy vegetables can meet the nutritional requirement in the human diet. Most of the AIVs have high levels of nutrients, especially minerals, calcium, iron, vitamin C, A, and proteins. And this makes it important that strategic interventions should aim to increase consumption of these critical vegetables for addressing micronutrient deficiencies. And this calls for the need for strategies that promote innovations that can address the key limiting factor within the urban areas, especially the limiting factor of land availability among urban and peri-urban dwellers. In response to this, the National Agricultural Research Organization, through Mukono Zonal Agricultural Research and Development Institute, promoted backyard gardening innovations between 2014 and 2017 under a project titled Enhancing Crop Productivity and Marketing in Urban and Peri-urban Areas. The overall objective was mainly to enhance production, consumption, and marketing of vegetables among the urban dwellers in central Uganda. Backyard gardening innovations, especially the food towers, sacks, bags, buckets, tires, among others, were promoted to offer urban dwellers a variety of options from which they can select innovations that are more appropriate to them for use. And this just shows a pictorial of some of the innovations that were promoted, where we have the food towers, and here we see beneficiaries participating. We also set up some demonstrations with the pupils in different primary schools. This is a pictorial of vegetables being grown on bags or sacks. These are wooden boxes, and this is also a farmer's home decorated with sacks that are growing in the vegetables that are growing in sacks. So these demonstrations mainly were complemented with the training and exchange visits, and this mainly aimed to enhance experience sharing and also enhance learning among the ultimate beneficiaries of this project. Trainings mainly focused on establishment of backyard gardening innovations, agronomic practices, farming as a business, and also highlighting the importance of backyard gardening innovations as a way of increasing availability of vegetables for consumption and sale. Specifically, this study was conducted in 2017 to try and understand the uptake of backyard gardening innovations among these urban dwellers and their subsequent contribution to vegetable consumption among urban dwellers in the project sites of Kampala, Wakiso, and Masaka. And this study mainly employed a cross-sectional descriptive survey that involved beneficiaries of the project. Qualitative and quantitative methods were used. We conducted a survey with a total of 104 beneficiaries using a pre-tested semi-structured questionnaire. We also conducted 6 disaggregated focus group discussions with the 28 participants. And in terms of sampling, we mainly used both passive and random sampling methods. And August this year, we also conducted a follow-up study to assess the impact of COVID on the uptake of these backyard gardening innovations. Data were mainly analyzed using qualitative and quantitative processes, where we use descriptive and inferential statistics for quantitative data, used thematic and narrative techniques for the qualitative data. In terms of the key results, we realized from the study results that about 58% of the beneficiaries only got to know about the backyard gardening innovations during the project period between 2014 and 2017. And 65 of these reported to have started using backyard gardening innovations in the same period. And 98% of all the respondents for this study are reported to be using at least one of the innovations. And recycled bins, as you observe from the table here, the figure here, were the most widely adopted innovations. And the results also showed that decisions regarding the type of backyard gardening innovation to use and which crops to grow were mainly decisions that were taken by women, even in households where there were adult male principal decision makers. In terms of the incentives and disincentives for use of these backyard gardening innovations, results indicated that ease of establishment, ease of management and affordability, as well as space optimization, were the critical factors that determined the choice of the backyard gardening innovation. However, on the other side, you also noted that the low use of backyard gardening innovation was mainly attributed to the high cost that is involved in especially the materials. This made it more unaffordable to the beneficiaries or to the ultimate users. The high intensive labor requirement, especially in establishing these innovations, but also some of the respondents indicated inadequate practical skills in establishment and management of these new innovations. The figure on the extreme right, one shows these reasons for preferences and also the reasons that limited the use of these innovations. As you may observe when you look at the greenhouses here, you will note that many of the respondents indicated that these greenhouses were too costly to construct, and the same with the wooden boxes being too costly, but also lack of the raw materials that are required to be able to establish this. For the food tower, the main limitation was the issue to do with the labor that is required to establish these kind of innovations. And for the farmers that did not, for the respondents that did not use the sacks, they mainly reported that they had some land available where they could put up the raised beds or the small kitchens within their own premises. In terms of the vegetables that were being grown on these backyard gardening innovations, results indicate that many people preferred to grow tomatoes, African eggplant, onions, sukuma, and eggplants. And we realize from the result that across the backyard gardening technologies, these still were the main kind of vegetables that were grown. And this choice here could be attributed to the diverse need and hence different farmers within the urban and peri-urban areas targeting crops that can meet their food, nutrition, and income security needs. African eggplant specifically has been reported widely in literature to have a great potential for increasing nutritional security. This is just a graphical presentation of the food tower and how this contributes to diversified production of vegetables, especially promoting a combination of a wide range of vegetables. So many of the farmers found different innovations being appropriate for different vegetables. In terms of the contribution of these vegetables and the backyard gardening innovations to consumption intensity, with the results indicated that 98% of the beneficiary reported an increase in consumption of vegetables. And this consumption intensity increased from a mean of about 3 times a week to 5 times a week. And the results of the follow-up survey indicate that consumption, especially of the key vegetables, increased even during the COVID-19 period, with 56% of the respondents reporting a frequency of 70 times a week. And 71% of the respondents also reported that they were able to set up new backyard gardening innovations, while others maintained those ones that they had before. So ultimately, we concluded that these backyard gardening innovations play a critical role in enhancing food security and nutrition among the urban and peri-urban dwellers. And this really has potential to enhance nutrition and income of the urban and peri-urban dwellers. Promoting use of backyard gardening innovation among urban and peri-urban dwellers is likely to stimulate urban farming, which is a viable solution to food insecurity, malnutrition, and unemployment. We also concluded that increase in the level of awareness and adoption of backyard gardening innovation was present in the study sites, and therefore the interventions that were implemented enhanced farmers' capacity to practice the backyard gardening innovations. Urban dwellers, especially women and the youth, needed to be empowered to innovatively use local available materials as a strategy to reduce on the cost and also enhance adoption of these backyard gardening innovations as a way of increasing their income and nutritional benefits among the end users. And ultimately, to enhance uptake of these to enhance uptake of these innovations for food, nutrition, and income security, Further research needs to focus on the cost-benefit analysis of the different backyard gardening innovations, but also focus on optimum vegetable cropping combinations based on the existing production systems to maximize yields. I want to thank you so much for listening in and being part of this presentation, and I want to acknowledge the organizers and sponsors of Tropentag 2020 for giving me the opportunity to participate. But most importantly, I want to acknowledge the support by NARO management, and I also acknowledge the World Bank ETAS project for funding this project and all the participating farmers and in the participating districts for being part of this study. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you the best with the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucira. Thank you very much. It's really interesting. I am seeing that there is a question from Enoch. Enoch, I invite you to ask the question yourself, unless you have a computer problem.
Okay. Thank you, Lozira, for the presentation. I would like to know, currently, is there any national policy supporting the adoption of the backyard garden initiative or innovation? And secondly, has there been any improvement in the accessibility to vegetables? And if there has, what is the implication on those who are producing on the large scale? Because if backyard gardens are producing, which means that in the market, those who are bringing from the rural areas, there will be demand will reduce. What is the economic implication, or that has not been considered yet? These are my questions.
Thank you so much, Enoch, for the question, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to respond to the question. Within Uganda, especially in, for example, Kampala City Authority, we have an agency that is responsible for whatever happens. And within this agency, there is a policy provision for urban farming. So within the peri-urban and peri-urban areas, it's acceptable to engage in urban farming. But like you have indicated, these are mainly small-scale kind of production practices that are practiced, where you find many people, some of them having those small backyard gardens, but we also have a few people that have access to land, especially in the peri-urban areas, where they are producing on a slightly larger scale. And even around the city, which is Kampala, you find we have many commercial farmers that are actually engaged in vegetable production. And as NARO, we have equally supported some of these commercial farmers to engage, for example, in seed production, where some of them are producing on contract basis with seed companies, and they are able to supply the other vegetable farmers. But in terms of the actual demand, like you have indicated, we have not gone into analysis of probably what is happening to these commercial farmers in terms of reduced demand. But what I want to say that currently, in terms of the supply of the vegetables, we are still far below the demand within the urban and peri-urban centers.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see a question from the wider audience. I might therefore also use the chance. Explain us a bit more about this backyard gardening, really in the urban area. Because with all these raised beds and sacks, etc., of course, one has the problem that there is very limited space, finally, to plant different crops. And do people have no access at all to some square meters of land, even in their backyards, for small home gardens? Or is the soil condition so poor? Or what are reasons to go for these, the forms that you have presented?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Like you have rightly put it, the main limiting factor is land. Land, because they don't have like access to land where they can be able to establish this. And basically, when you look at the setting within the urban and peri-urban centers of Uganda, these are people who are more congested together. So in terms of innovation, for example, we promote even the hanging gardens, where people, for example, on their verandas, they can use hanging pots and grow these vegetables in those hanging pots or buckets, and even on their verandas. So if you have the bags, you have the old tires, you have a bucket, you can have these filled up with soil, and then you use this like along your veranda within your, on the veranda of your house, yeah? So they actually don't, if you're using some of these innovations, apart from the small micro kitchen garden, you don't need like land. You may need those resources, be able to get the material that is required, be able to fill up with the soil, and then access to the seed that you need, and you're good to go to plant, yeah? So that's yeah, mainly, as you may have noted from the presentation, the production is mainly limited for people who are adopting these backyard gardening innovations. It's mainly limited to people who are doing vegetable production, because it can't support like commercial level of, let's say, maize or beans. Yeah, so these are mainly farmers that are producing small quantities of vegetables, but where they can earn a daily income as well.
From that. Yeah, because I was wondering, so it means they don't have any land, because if you have these raised beds or sacks, then you need 4 sacks in order to have 1 square meter of land in a way. And therefore I was wondering whether they are really living in such situations where they do not even have 10 square meters of land that they could use for some tomatoes or so.
Yeah, many some of them, especially in the peri-urban, they have access to land. It's only in the urban, and those urban poor, like I've stated, who actually in the informal, you would call them more or less a slum setting, that don't have access to land, but at the same time don't have the resources to be able to buy the vegetables. So those ones, looking at those innovations as a way of mitigating the challenge with access to the land, and also being able to produce food that they can use, yeah? So mainly in the urban slum areas, these people don't have land. I'm sure if you search and look at Kampala City, look at the slum part of it, you would get a clear picture of what I'm talking about.
So it is in a way an alternative to these small roadside cropping areas, etc. also then, which you find around these areas.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
So in a way, these micro gardens are then also an alternative to these small roadside farming areas where you see people really just on the side of the road using some few square meters for planting some potatoes or tomatoes.
Yes, you're very right. The micro, small kitchen garden are more of an alternative also in areas where people have, let's say, even if it is, let's say, 2 square meters, where they can be able to plant a few vegetables which they can pluck on a daily basis as well. So in some, even in those informal settlements, in those slum areas, you find there are a few people that have access and they can be able to grow this. But from our findings, the micro gardens were more common in the peri-urban areas, because there the space is more accommodating for them to be able to establish this.
Yeah, thank you. I see we have one question here from our internet audience, and the question is by Erika Wagner Medina, and she says, thanks, Lucira. Are you working on producing your own seeds also in this study or in the whole project?
Currently, NARO is a research institution that is mandated to do agricultural research within the country. So one of our obligations is to generate new varieties. So mainly our role is to work with farmers to be able to improve on the vegetables that they are growing, support them in coming up with better agronomic and management practices, but then we support the farmers to produce the vegetable seed through training. And this is mainly because most of the seed companies have not, the commercial seed companies have not been so much into production, especially of these African leafy vegetables. So it remains upon us to work with the farmers to be able to do this, but link them with the seed companies so that they can gain interest in expanding their portfolio to include some of these crops that we are working on. So as an institute, we are not directly producing the seed, but working with different stakeholders to meet the demand.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question from Enoch, but Enoch, I ask you to ask Lucira after the session so that we are not going now into the break, that people have a chance for drinking a coffee before the new sessions start later. So I want actually now to thank really my presenters here in the session. Your presentations made the session really very interesting. Thank you very much for this. I have seen that we had throughout the time 36 attendants from outside, so your information was also well heard. And I hope you will still get feedback from some of the participants, maybe in an extra message exchanged over the WOVA platform. Thank you very much to everyone. It was nice interacting with you.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Yes.
Have a nice time.
Yes. Enjoy the Tropentag. Good.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.